My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome for my 18th birthday, a plane ticket and a check for expenses. It was the most incredible, thoughtful gift I could imagine. But the very next day, my parents started this campaign, this soft, persistent pressure to give the trip to my older sister, June. She's 21, and if you haven't guessed, she's the golden child. The perfect one. Their argument was that June is studying architecture, and a trip to Rome would be a career investment for her. It would help her language skills and let her see the architecture firsthand. I tried to fight back. I told them I planned to study literature, and Rome, with all its history and art, was just as important for me. Besides, June already had her chance. On her 18th, our grandparents offered her an international trip too, but she refused and said she'd just prefer the cash. Now it was my turn, and I didn't want to give my gift away. I also knew, or at least I was pretty sure, that airline tickets aren't really transferable to another person except in special cases. But my parents waved that off. They told me not to worry about the details. They just needed the physical ticket, and they would figure something out. This argument, this quiet, draining battle went on for weeks. 2 whole weeks after my birthday. In the end, I caved. I didn't want to. I felt a deep, cold sense of injustice. But they wore me down. They started guilting me, listing everything they had ever sacrificed for me, and asked for this one small thing in return. It wasn't small to me. It was my dream. A couple of days ago, in a moment of irritation, they finally said the quiet part out loud. They said they didn't want the trip to be wasted. The word hung in the air. They tried to backtrack quickly, saying they just meant it would be more useful for June at this stage in her life, but the damage was done. They thought if I went, it would be a waste. If June went, it was worthwhile. They tried to clean it up, saying June had graduated and it would look good on her resume, while I had my whole life ahead for trips like this, unlike June, who was starting a job soon. So, with a heavy heart and a feeling of profound defeat, I gave them the ticket. I was just so tired of fighting. At least I still had the check from my grandparents. And part of me held onto a naive hope that the airline rules would be a wall they couldn't climb. They must have found a loophole, or thought they did. Because yesterday, on the day of the flight, June took my boarding pass and headed to the airport without me. Then the call came from the police. June had been in an accident on the way and was taken to the hospital. The story we got was surreal. She was in a taxi, got paranoid that the driver was going the wrong way and would make her miss the flight, and in a moment of sheer panic and arrogance, she actually grabbed the steering wheel. The car swerved, hit a tree. June escaped with just scratches, but the driver was seriously hurt. Broken arm, a deep gash on his forehead that needed stitches, and he was suing. My parents would now have to drain their savings to pay him off and settle this without a trial. When I heard all this, sitting in the kitchen with my parents as they were frantic, the words just tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. I said maybe it was karma for making me give up my trip to Rome. I saw the shock on their faces immediately, and I regretted it. They said some things you just don't joke about, that words have weight, and that I couldn't just take it back. They said this proved my true, selfish colors. That set me on fire. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They were the ones who said the trip would be wasted on me. I threw that right back at them. But they just shook their heads, said after a remark like that, they weren't even going to engage, and they left for the hospital. In that moment, a switch flipped. A clarity I'd never felt before. I was sacrificing my happiness for people who would never, ever value me. Why was I doing this? I packed a small bag with the bare essentials, called a taxi, and went to the hospital myself. I arrived just a couple of minutes after them. I walked into the emergency area, found a room. My parents were there, June was there, talking to police officers. She was trying to explain it wasn't really her fault, that the driver was confused. I didn't look at my parents. I walked straight up to June. I asked her, my voice surprisingly calm, if she still had my boarding pass. She just looked at me, dazed and confused from the whole ordeal. So I didn't wait. I grabbed her purse from the chair, rummaged through it, found the folded paper with my name on it, took it, and just turned and walked out. I left a room of stunned, silent people behind. I got back into my waiting taxi and told the driver to get to the airport as fast as legally possible. I made it at the absolute last minute, breathless, and got on that plane to Rome. I didn't check my phone until the wheels touched down in Italy. When I finally turned it on, the storm had broken. My parents' messages said I was heartless, that my sister was in a traumatic accident, and all I could think about was a vacation. June's texts accused me of stealing her opportunity, which was rich, considering she stole mine first. The general consensus from them was that I was a monster. June even sent a separate message saying our parents now had to spend their life savings because of the taxi driver, and I, knowing how tight money was, should be offering my birthday check to help them instead of selfishly spending it on fun in Rome. But since I was just a selfish brat, she figured she'd ask the world instead. So, I'm asking you, was I the bad guy for flying to Rome after my sister's accident? Let me clear some things up. First, the boarding pass. I'm convinced my parents and June never actually found a legal way to transfer the ticket. I think her plan was to just show up at the airport and hope no one checked too closely. If they had properly changed the name, my passport wouldn't have worked. Their lack of a real plan was my lucky break. Second, why did I even live with them if it was so bad? You get used to the water you're swimming in. For 18 years, I kept trying. I thought if I was just better, quieter, more helpful, more accomplished, they'd finally see me and love me like they loved June. It was a cycle of hope and crushing disappointment. My grandparents live out of town, and leaving never felt like a real option. Now it does. About the accident itself, June has always been a control freak. She probably sat in the front seat out of habit. She grabbed the wheel because she was convinced she knew the route to the airport better than a professional driver. That insane need for control is what caused the crash. She'd left for the airport almost 5 hours early. That should tell you everything. Now, for the first update. After a couple of days in Rome, I decided to stop fretting and just enjoy the gift. I was right. I wouldn't have this chance again soon. I finally called my grandparents and told them everything. The favoritism, the pressure to give up the trip, the wasted comment, all of it. I'd never told anyone, not even my closest friends. It was a huge relief. They were horrified. They said I did the right thing by taking the trip and told me that when I returned, I should come straight to their house, not go home. They said they'd arrange for me to move in with them. When I mentioned college in the fall, they said not to worry, they'd handle the expenses. That one phone call changed my entire future. I didn't have to be afraid anymore. My trip ended, and I went directly from the airport to my grandparents' house. They'd already moved all my things. They'd had a showdown with my parents. It turned out my parents called them the night of the accident, not about me, but to ask for money to help with the taxi driver settlement. When my grandparents confronted them about how they treated me, my parents first tried to dodge, then finally admitted it. But they said I had proven I deserved it by abandoning the family in a crisis. They said I only came to the hospital to steal the boarding pass, that I was always jealous of June because she was better at everything, and that I was spoiled and selfish. They said they were done tolerating my behavior. That was the final straw for my grandparents. They decided to cut ties with their own son. My parents said if my grandparents wanted me, they could have me. So, they hired people to pack my room. Hearing this from my grandparents, I broke down crying. It was one thing to know it, another to hear them say it so coldly. But my grandparents were my sanctuary. I finally checked my backlog of messages. June's were a torrent of insults. Selfish, spoiled, worthless, and that she was glad to be rid of me. My parents' messages were worse. They said they'd failed to raise me right, that I was heartless, and that they were finally at peace without me. They wrote that they'd given me a comfortable life, a roof and food, and that my complaints were just the whining of a jealous child. They said they were right to call me a waste of space. Those words cut deep, but I had promised myself not to let them break me again. I didn't cry this time. I just blocked all their numbers. Then, the unbelievable finale. About 2 weeks later, my parents showed up at my grandparents' door. They completely ignored me. They marched in and presented a printed bill. They demanded almost $120,000 as reimbursement for the cost of raising me. Since my grandparents had taken over as my guardians, they should pay up. The audacity was stunning. My grandparents listened calmly, then said they needed to discuss it privately. They left the room. An awkward, heavy silence hung in the air with me and my parents not even looking at each other. They returned a few minutes later. My grandfather sat down and said, very calmly, yes. It would pay the money, on one condition, that my parents first repay every single cent they had ever borrowed from my grandparents over the years. The color drained from my parents' faces. They were completely cornered. They spluttered, tried to argue, but had nothing. They finally just started yelling in frustration and stormed out, slamming the door. They haven't come back. I'm living with my grandparents now, in a home filled with actual love. I leave for college soon, and for the first time, I'm excited for my future. So, was I wrong to get on that plane to Rome? It was, without a doubt, the best and most liberating decision I have ever made. It was the first step I took toward my own life. If this story made you feel something, anger, vindication, sadness, let us know in the comments below. What do you think about her choice? Was it selfish or self-preservation? Your discussions are the best part of this channel. If you want to hear more real, raw stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. And if you're glad she got on that plane, or if you just appreciate a story with a satisfying ending, show it with a like on this video. It tells the algorithm you want more. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end.